Warning, this podcast is definitely not for the kiddos. We'll be discussing violence, disturbing crimes, and even the gut-wrenching topic of sexual assault. And did I mention our twisted sense of humor? Yeah, we share some laughs at the expense of unfortunate situations, but who doesn't love dark comedy while discussing the most horrifying things humanity has to offer? So if you're up for exploring the darkest corners of the human psyche while also enduring some sarcastic chuckles along the way, go ahead. But remember, we won't take any responsibility for the nightmares that might haunt you afterwards. Welcome to Twisted Thoughts, ADHD's Dark Side, the podcast that delves into the intriguing and chilling world where neurodivergence meets crime. I'm your host, the Neurodivergent Nurse, and together we'll explore the untold stories of criminals whose lives were shaped by their battle with ADHD. In each episode, we'll unravel the complex web of thoughts, impulses, and actions that led these individuals down a dark path. We'll examine the unique challenges and struggles they faced, the impact of their neurodivergent minds on their criminal behavior, and the ripple effects on the victims and society. Prepare to be captivated by the twisted tales as we shine light on the shadows of ADHD. From impulsive acts of violence to meticulously planned crimes, we'll seek to understand the complex relationship between neurodivergence and criminality. Join me today on this thrilling journey as we peel back the layers of these twisted thoughts and embark on a quest for knowledge, compassion, and a deeper understanding of the human mind. This is Twisted Thoughts, ADHD's Dark Side. Welcome to this special episode, the new mini-series of The Neurodivergent Nurse. Today, for the very first one, I had to get my favorite host. They've been on my podcast before, and they've had me on theirs a couple times too. I just love hanging out with these girls. They just brighten my day. So anyways, Garrett, Katie, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your podcast before we hop into this episode?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm Garrett.
I'm Katie.
Also making eye contact with Katie's cat, who's giving a real dirty look from over her shoulder.
She's got a heating pad, so she should be fine. But we host a podcast called The Bar is Ankle High, which we started because we were both diagnosed with ADHD as adults. And after I was diagnosed, I kept messaging Garrett and kind of saying like, oh, and another thing, do you do this? And is that ADD? And is that something that you deal with? And so it was born out of this idea of what would my life look like now if I had known even 5 years ago that I had this, and was able to work on it and either treat with medication or with therapy or just have the information of the diagnosis so that I can set myself up for success and adjust my expectations of myself. So that was the idea behind our podcast. And it's been great. We're out for coming up on 50 episodes soon. We've been having a great time.
Yeah, we're actually starting to plan our 1 year podiversary,
I know.
which is crazy.
That is exciting. When is that?
September 1st.
Yeah. So it'll probably be the episode that comes out the week after September 1st, because I think September 1st is a Friday this year. Our episodes come out on Thursdays. But yeah, it's coming up.
Well, we're going to also talk about people who have ADHD, but criminals. So on this episode, we're going to talk about Richard Ramirez. In my head, while I was writing this stuff and putting this all together, I cannot say this guy's last name, and it's not a difficult one, but you may hear me say it about 25 different ways while I'm talking about this guy.
Well, he's AKA the Night Stalker.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Oh, good. So I'm glad
I
y'all
didn't
can
realize
just
he
add
had
details.
ADD.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't either.
Interesting.
Yep.
I just knew he had rank breath and
Those teeth.
those good gnarly teeth. They were real bad.
Yeah. I think Netflix just did a docuseries in the last couple of years on him that I watched.
Yes, 2021. I was not able to watch it like I did the other person that I thought we were doing.
Well, that's okay because I forget things as soon as I watch them, so I won't have a ton of gaps to fill in.
That's unfortunate. I was hoping you would fill in the gaps.
That's okay. I
for
watched the
today's
documentary. I can help.
Oh yeah, Katie will remember. I just don't ever.
Oh, perfect. So that's good because like I said this morning, whenever I was texted y'all and I was saying, I need a little bit more time because I was literally still putting everything together. So I only have, meat and potatoes. Therefore, you're going to be the perfect person for this. Even more so.
That's great.
Yeah. So he's called Richard, but he was born Ricardo, and he was the youngest of 5 kids. He was born in El Paso, Texas, to Mexican immigrants, Mercedes and Julian. So he had 4 brothers and sisters, and they were all born with birth defects due to the fact that their mom worked at a boot factory, and she was
shit.
exposed to a lot of chemical fumes while she was pregnant.
Jesus.
Yeah. And so this reminded me
Wild.
of the episode that we did on your podcast about 23andMe, where they were saying that maybe they can help figure out through genetics and stuff
Mm-hmm.
with who has a tendency or more prone to have ADHD. And while we were learning about all of that in the genetics, we also know that there's some environmental factors that can cause ADHD too, right? Like brain injuries or alcohol and substance abuse, some of the things that we talked about even prior to hitting the record button on this episode.
Mm-hmm.
That is the craziest thing, I think, in the research that we've done. You'll read and it's like, well, it can be genetic, you can be born with it, or you could have a traumatic brain injury that's causing you to have really poor focus. It's just like wild that those are the 2 factors that are so big.
I agree. And when you were talking earlier, or, when we were having a conversation about what our moms did whenever they were pregnant with us, but my dad definitely has ADHD. He got diagnosed after I did. But I keep thinking, is it because my mom smoked while she was pregnant? I mean, is that because I see the correlation between the 2? I wonder if that kind of led my brain
Or maybe
to that.
made it more pronounced, or
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, I maintain that I think ADHD is a spectrum disorder similar to autism. So I think to the extent that potentially there's like those environmental triggers for ADHD, I think there's also the idea that, because I mean, I know that we all hear it a lot where everybody's a little ADHD. And I think that to the extent that sometimes, everybody has a day where they just can't focus no matter what they do. Sure, it's called burnout and it can happen to neurotypical people too. But to the extent that that goes from a neurotypical experience into a neurodivergent experience is a spectrum. How much are you going to be affected by your mother smoking while you're in utero, or drinking, or whatever, being exposed to tannins, evidently? And,
that's so crazy.
To the extent that that could injure the fetus, which we've also talked about, particularly in our hormone episodes, is they just don't test these things on women in general, but definitely not pregnant women. So that's why it's like, can you take Pepto-Bismol? Everything you have to Google, because they're like, well, we just don't know. So the answer is no, because we don't want to risk it, which I understand. Like I've said before, I'm not going to sign up to risk my baby being severely disabled as a result of saying like, well, we've got to find out somehow. And it's like, well, I wish you would test that on a mouse or something first.
Yeah. Are you ready for an adventure? The Neurodivergent Nurse is thrilled about the upcoming trip to Spain from October 9th to October 15th, 2023. I am so excited to invite you to join us on an unforgettable journey through the beautiful cities of Sevilla, Cordoba, and Granada. This trip is tailored for neurodivergent individuals, creating a supportive and understanding environment for all travelers. Experience Spain's rich culture, explore historic sites, and immerse yourself in local traditions. Our trip will include exciting activities such as flamenco and tapas night, a panoramic sunset cocktail hour, and a relaxing boat ride down the river, and that's just the beginning. You'll also have the opportunity to stroll through the charming streets of Cordoba's Old Town and soak up the vibrant atmosphere of Sevilla's many plazas. Our experienced and knowledgeable guides will provide unique insights into the history and culture of each location. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to create lasting memories, build new friendships, and experience the beauty of Spain in a supportive and inclusive environment. Don't miss out on this amazing trip with the Neurodivergent Nurse. For more information and to reserve your spot, click the link in the show notes.
But there's those things where I think, because I think that ADHD is a spectrum disorder, there can be those instances where smoking might, if it doesn't cause it, it's what brings it out. So like you always had ADHD, but perhaps you struggle more with the anxiety part of ADHD or the disorganization part, or you have more impulsive control issues. So I think it's not necessarily one or the other.
I agree completely. Well, Richard, he ended up at 2 years old, he had a dresser fall on his head. So not only did he have the chemical exposure while in utero, but now he's having head injuries. So that was the first one. Yeah, and
The
then
first one.
the first one, yeah, at 5 years old, he was knocked unconscious by a swing, and he actually started having epilepsy and seizures because of that injury. And they also say that he sustained multiple additional head injuries at a really early age.
Would they just like put him in a dryer and soften it up? Like, Jesus Christ.
Like, it's not funny. But I know that, like, if I had been
Garrett, you're out.
and my sibling got nailed in the head with a swing, I would have laughed really.
I for sure took some tumbles as a child. I wasn't knocked unconscious by those tumbles.
No, that's wild.
Like, I didn't, as far as I know, have a fucking dresser fall on me. Damn.
Which is why they have them like anchored to the wall now. And you think about like those
That's
old
true. They probably
swim-
didn't anchor them back then.
But I mean, 2 years old, that's a
Yeah.
pretty strong kid to be able to pull down a whole dresser.
Well, that's
if
what they
you-
warn
I'm
about is
thinking,
like pulling the
pull out
drawers
the
open and
drawer and
climbing.
then- Yeah.
Yeah, I did that a lot as a kid.
But think
I
about
never
like
did that. It
those
didn't occur to
swings.
me.
I think about like how heavy those playground swings are.
Mhm.
Like, man, if that caught you the wrong way, that could totally knock you out. That is so crazy.
Well, then fast forward just a little bit to when he was 12 years old. He had a cousin, Miguel, that they called Mike, who was a Green Beret. He had been in the Vietnam War.
Yeah, he
And-
was like weird, right?
Yeah. And he was one of those people that Richard really looked up to. And he started to influence Richard's worldview as he became like that role model person. And the way that he did that, though, is by showing him Polaroids of women that he raped. And he told him graphic stories of violence and mutilation that he inflicted on a lot of the Vietnamese women. I also read
Yeah.
somewhere that he showed him a picture of him holding like a severed head of a woman that he
I
posed
do
with.
remember this.
Um,
now that you
yeah,
say
I
it.
remember that from the documentary that he was, I mean, clearly we don't know if his cousin, I think it's probably fair to say that he was struggling with some PTSD from being in a war zone, especially Vietnam. Like there's plenty of people who are in Vietnam that are still struggling today. But I mean, it doesn't excuse showing a child these images
No.
as like a way of trying to normalize what you saw and normalize what you did when you were in a war zone. Not that I'm excusing that behavior either, but if we had just had like comprehensive mental health care for our troops in the 70s and 80s, then maybe.
If we still did.
Or now.
Yeah, but if only, we had done that back then and they had acknowledged what they did to these troops and what the situations that they put these troops in, then maybe people like Richard Ramirez wouldn't have done what he ended up doing. But yeah, I remember in the documentary they were talking about how he was like describing to him and it was like kind of as he was coming into puberty, right?
Yeah, he was
So, like,
12.
Yeah, like as a child, you're discovering those sexual hormones and those urges. And so then when you're tying that into like extremely graphic imagery and this person that you're looking up to, your brain is going to conflate those things.
Especially when you've got multiple brain injuries.
Right. Yeah. He was already playing with a stacked deck against him. So
That's one way to put it. Yeah.
And then when he was 13, he saw his cousin shoot his wife in the face whenever they were going through like a domestic dispute. They were arguing. So he pulled out a gun and shot and killed his wife. So he was there for that too.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Did the cousin go to jail for that? Do you know?
He did. He went to jail for 4 years, but then
Oh,
he
good.
was found not guilty on grounds of insanity.
Okay.
So after that,
Oh.
Richard moved in with his sister Ruth and her husband Roberto. And Roberto ended up being a peeping Tom and would take Richard along with him for his after dark acts too.
Was everybody just poisoned by the water in this town? Like,
It
what is
sounds
going
like it.
on?
It's the boots.
Just new boot goofing.
Like the worst kind of new boot goofing. Oh my God.
Holy shit.
I almost can't even blame him for being a monster now, because how could he not with all of
Right.
these
Like,
things
what
in
did we
play?
expect him to
Right.
turn out as?
Right.
Not even count, like, even if he didn't have all of the brain injuries and probably some sort of learning disability as a result of chemical exposure in utero. But then on top of it, he's going on these deranged field trip, cursed Miss Frizzle. And Whoa.
And they also said that his dad was really abusive physically to the entire family.
I believe that. I mean,
And he
God.
was leaving go sleep in cemeteries, Richard was, to get away from his dad's abuse.
That is a quiet place, probably
Yeah.
at night. I mean, I hope.
Well, then when he became an adolescent, he ended up getting a job at the Holiday Inn, but he didn't keep that job very long, though, because he would use his pass key to rob people who were sleeping. And his employment ended up ending really abruptly because he attempted to rape a woman in her hotel room before her husband got back. But her husband ended up returning and catching him trying to do that. And he beat the fire out of Richard. But they ended up dropping the criminal charges because the couple lived out of state and they didn't want to come back to state to testify against him.
So he got another brain injury probably from getting the shit kicked out of him. And then they didn't prosecute him.
Right.
I
Because they
did
didn't
this
want to come back.
this continuing ed class for my license. So if your listeners don't know, I'm a lawyer by day. So I have to take these continuing ed classes every year or two to maintain my license. And I took one that was about ADHD screening for children who are involved in the criminal justice system, and how it was this criminal defense attorney. And he was talking about how any child who comes into his office and needs defense, he discusses basically whether it's drug court or juvenile court or whatever, even if they're being tried as an adult, he makes sure that part of their plea, if most of them end up pleading out anyway, especially as juveniles, that they are given an assessment for ADHD and learning disabilities, because so many people with learning disabilities and ADHD act out in potentially violent or destructive ways when they can't read, or they're having difficulty reading, or potentially they just have eyesight problems and they can't see the chalkboard. And so then you stop paying attention. So it was just an interesting CLE, but he talked about how important it is for decreasing recidivism rates among youths that you actually screen for these things that potentially aren't getting caught by the school or by the parents through no fault of their own necessarily. But you can't expect somebody to not make that mistake again if you're just sending them back into the world without giving them the tools that they need to be successful. And one of those tools is giving them a diagnosis. Like we just were saying before, just having the information of the diagnosis is so helpful. It just gives you, like, knowledge is power. Even if you're not going to take medication, if you're not in a place where you're comfortable going to therapy for it, at least you have that information so you can say, okay, I'm not a bad person because my dishes are literally overflowing my sink and I can't be bothered to empty my dishwasher. Like, it's just that I need somebody here to do it with me so that I can do it. It's not a personal failing, but if you don't have that information, it can be really easy to let yourself slide down that destructive path instead of trying to figure out a way that works for you to get out of it. If Richard Ramirez had ADHD, then, even with the charges having been dropped, if he had gone enough through that process and maybe gotten a screening for whatever learning disability he may or may not have
literally
had.
anything of the
Right.
number
Right.
of things that could have been wrong.
Yeah, like a fucking CPS intervention, because
Right.
no adults in his life were giving him any sort of healthy guidance, it seems.
Yeah.
Then he would have potentially also been, at least then we'd be like, what an asshole. And we wouldn't have to feel bad for who he turned out to be, because you're like, well, fuck, what'd you expect?
Yeah. And I mean, even with a diagnosis, because you know how we can become so hyper focused on things that we are interested in. So obviously the seed was planted with this guy.
Mhm.
And I, again, don't condone any of this horrible stuff, but like I can see how that hyper focus and just like wanting more and more, especially sadly, his hits of dopamine came from really brutal things later on. But yeah, if there was some type of treatment for mental health, period, then a lot of people would not have been harmed, I feel like.
Yeah.
Well, right. And I mean, either his cousin or his uncle or his brother-in-law, rather, were giving him this approval by him participating in these like cracked out field trips. So that's where he learned to get dopamine from, is by doing those things, because either my older cousin will like me or my brother-in-law will like me, and like we can bro out on that, and you get that, like, you feel less lonely because you have somebody to do stuff with. And yeah, the thing might be depraved, but that's what he's learning. So his brain is already making that connection. And the more you repeat that connection, we discussed this in our Cannibal Cop episode that we recorded. But if you keep exercising those connections in your brain, it's just like exercising any other muscle in your body. It's going
those
to
pathways.
it's going to be
Mhm.
so much easier for you to go down and continue to seek that. But then you also have to continuously up the ante.
Right, because you're not going to get that rush that you're looking for with the same old breaking into hotel rooms and stealing things that you've been getting this whole time.
Right.
And then you take it that next step and it just escalates. And had he been stopped at that juncture, if that couple had not stepped back from pressing charges, I mean, his outcome could have been completely different.
Mhm.
Probably not good, but less
well-
bad.
Yeah.
Well, he also got arrested, or he got in trouble for some minor things too when he was really young too. I think maybe drug possession. I can't remember exactly. I didn't put those in the notes. There are just multiple spots where interventions could have happened that would have helped change the trajectory of his entire life, or the spree that he went on for a little bit of time.
Yeah, it's kind of like that butterfly effect thing
Mhm.
where just one thing could have completely changed the course of his life, for better or worse, maybe. But when you take all of these different things together, you kind of set off this chain reaction where at a certain point, you can't stop it. It becomes Chernobyl.
Well, and how many kids are neurotypical or have behavioral issues due to other factors and are
Right.
labeled as bad kids,
Mhm.
and people don't want to take the time to invest in them, or they aren't given access to the services that they need access to, and it just their life derails and it really just goes in such a bad direction. It's awful that in this situation so many other people wound up involved too.
Yeah. He ended up moving from Texas to California when he was 22. But in 1984, this is the first time that they found something that he did, someone that he hurt, even though later at the very end, we'll talk about in 2016, they found that this person was not the actual first one. But in 1984, this man came home to see his mom, and he found his 79-year-old mother's body there. Her throat had been slashed, she'd been stabbed repeatedly, and she was almost decapitated. And so then the son, his name was Jack Vinco, I don't know. But he ran to the building manager to call the police. He waited about 8 or 9 months before he acted again. So that was actually kind of a long period of time that he waited before the first murder, before he went to do something violent again. So March 17th, 1985 is when the serial murders started up. Maria Hernandez was getting home after a day of work, and unknowingly, Richard had been prowling the neighborhood and seeking his next victim. So as she parked her car, she began to walk towards her front door, and he noticed her, and he decided that he was going to seize the opportunity. Without warning, he attacked Maria. He grabbed a handgun, demanded that she give him her valuables. So she complied. She handed over her belongings, just like he told her to, but that wasn't good enough for him. Consumed by his sadistic desires, he pulled out his gun and he tried to shoot her, but the bullet ricocheted off of a set of her keys, and so it only grazed her face.
I remember this part of the documentary because it was like she put her hand up when he had the gun pointed at her to cover her face, and it hit her keys, and he panicked after that.
Because he thought he shot her in the head.
Right.
Yeah.
And because I think she went down, but nothing happened. And then, go ahead. I feel like I'm interrupting the story.
No, I'm glad, because again, whenever I was reading this, I didn't watch the docuseries. So I was just reading different reports and stuff on it to try to put it together. And so I could not make a connection between what he did here. But I did read that, just like you said, that she fell down, she kind of played dead. But then after that, he went and actually shot her roommate in the head and killed her.
Okay, so that was the thing. I wasn't sure if this was the same story. So I think it's that her roommate came home and walked in on this. So then he shot and killed the roommate, and so the surviving woman had a lot of guilt because she was like, everything that
I
you
was
would
the
feel
target,
for,
right? Yeah.
having survived and blah blah blah. If I had just died, then he wouldn't have lingered, and this, that, and the other, any number of things. But yeah, she was a survivor. She became pretty critical to the hunt for him because she was able to obviously identify him. So what was the difference, though, when you say this started the serial murders? Did they link the murder of the 79-year-old woman to him?
Eventually, yeah.
Oh, okay. So when it first happened, though, did they think that it was just a random act of violence, or did they think it was somebody who knew her? Because that's like super violent.
Yeah, I don't know what because the information about that lady, the Jenny lady, I couldn't find a whole lot of information on her, just about what it looked like and how horrible and violent that it was, but not what the speculation was surrounding that initially. But the serial murders he actually started killing like multiple people on the same day too.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Because he left this after he shot the roommate. The roommate's name was Dale Yoshi Okazaki, is the one that he fatally shot in the head. An hour later, he went over to Monterey Park, and this person, Cillian Yu, I think is how you would pronounce it, but they used to call her Veronica. Anyhow, but Veronica was getting back to her car after an evening out. He saw her, and so he decided that he was going to seize that opportunity as well. So he came up to her vehicle, pulled her out, and he shot her twice. And then that was when he got named the walk-in killer and the Valley Intruder. So that's what they started.
Both of those names, those are both haunting as
Awful.
hell.
Yeah.
I wonder why they always give serial killers such cool names. It should be like the small dick killer. Like, to hold down the notoriety, they give them these really cool names. And I feel like it makes them, when they hear being coined that, then it's like a cape, it's a great brand that they have now.
BTK got off on it, and obviously the Zodiac Killer did too. So
we had that running joke between Katie and I about the guy who, it was like a similar type name in a similar area. It was the one who Patton Oswalt's wife was writing the book about.
Oh, yeah. Eron's the East Area Rapist.
Yeah. And it was something like
Golden
the Night
State
Stalker.
Killer. That's who
Yeah. It was like a similar name, but the way that they wound up, like, one of the ways they linked all of his crimes was that he had a really small peen. And we were like making all these jokes about like all the things they could have named him, all of the nicknames he could have been given instead of like
Garrett's favorite criminal, Mr. Gangrenous Flappy Doodles,
True.
Harvey Weinstein.
That's what they should have been calling him this whole time. Take the wind right out of his sails.
Because if you don't know, he had gangrene in his undercarriage on his testicles. And they had to like sew his actual testes like into his thigh to save
them
virility. Which like of all the people, like why? Just put a ping pong ball in there and call it a day. Come on.
Yeah. I've taken care of several patients who had that, and they end up like filleting these people in surgery. It is really, really gruesome.
Yeah, because
most of the time they don't live. They don't survive this.
Understandably so.
Yeah.
They're saying it's a lot of like diabetics, alcoholics. I don't remember like he might have been diabetic.
He is.
He's diabetic in this.
I did a deep dive on the different types of gangrene after that conversation because, of course, I did. Why wouldn't I? I mean, Jesus Christ. But
Well, when I started thought with, have you heard about Harvey Weinstein's balls? How can you not? Then Googling.
Right. Yeah. And then she mentioned it for like 5 or 6 episodes in a row after that.
Every time I get the opportunity, I still bring it up, and my spouse gets really mad.
That's why you bring it up.
Yes. Any chance to be annoying.
Well, unfortunately, this guy did not have it, but he did end up with cancer, and he died from that. So
good.
At the ripe old age of 53. But yeah.
Well, he wasn't destined to live a long life. I mean, all things considered.
Yeah. So 10 days after that whole spree where he murdered the 2 people, tried to kill a third, 10 days later, he went into a home in California that he had previously burglarized. So there was a husband and wife that lived there, Vincent Charles Zazzara. These people have really cool names that unfortunately, that he heard. And so he lived there with his wife, Maxine, as well. So Charles was 64. His wife was 44. Well, he goes in there.
That's scandalous.
Somehow the least scandalous part of this whole thing.
So did you meet at her daycare?
But
Sorry, I know that's not the point of the
We're going to
story.
hell.
That is an age gap. I'm just saying.
It is a bit of one. So he goes in and he ends up shooting Charles in the head while he's asleep. Obviously, the wife's going to wake up from the gunshot.
I would hope.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Richard ends up beating her and he starts going through the room for more valuables. Maxine escapes and grabs a gun that isn't loaded. Unfortunately, it wasn't loaded. Yeah. And so he ended up shooting her 3 times.
Jeez.
Then he stabs her. Then he gouges out her eyes and puts them in a jewelry box and leaves them there.
Ew.
He left them?
Yeah.
Seems like a lot of work to leave them there.
That's very Game of Thronesy.
Yeah.
Well, the queen from the Game of Thrones follows me on Instagram.
What?
Lena Headey. Is that her name? Yeah.
Oh my
Mhm,
God. I
mhm.
would hath shat.
There's a lot of really interesting people that follow me. The one actress from Grey's Anatomy, the one who plays Amelia Shepherd, she's a follower of mine. Oh, speaking of age gaps, Hugh Hefner's widow, she's a follower of mine too. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep.
Huh.
Man, my mind is blown.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a whole deep dive and compared Hugh Hefner with Bob Barker on one of our Patreon
Good.
episodes.
Mhm.
Because I had a theory that Hugh Hefner is Bob Barker's evil twin.
Yes.
Yeah, he did have a beef though with Betty White about an
I gotta
elephant.
know.
Oh.
Like, I need to. That's gonna be what, like, when I die, I want. And there's like questions about the universe I want answered. That's one of them.
The rest of us will be like, what happens with that show that was canceled halfway through a season that never got an ending? And then Garrett's going to be like, hey, Betty and Bob, I need us all to sit down and talk about this elephant.
I need
And
to
the
know.
elephant's there.
And then Garrett will just send messages, like down so that we all can know that.
Yeah.
Before it's here,
The
just
opposite of
that
people
favor.
that do those like lanterns that go up into the sky, those paper
said one
lanterns.
Yeah,
It'll
she's
just
just
be
going to
the
send them
opposite
down
one.
to.
I'm gonna be writing on a steamy mirror when somebody's taking a shower. You're never gonna guess.
It was all Hugh Hefner's fault.
After the eyeballs, a month and a half later, he breaks into another family home, Bill and Lillian Joy's home in Monterey Park. He shoots the dude in the face, beats him unconscious, and then binds Lillian, and then searches their home for valuables, and then he rapes her. So Bill ended up dying in the hospital a little bit later from
Wow.
being shot in the face. How did you get shot in the face and you survived long enough to get to a hospital?
I mean, I have that question about people who try to take their own lives by shooting themselves in the face and then they end up horribly scarred, and which is, of course, devastating 2 different ways, I guess you could look at it. But yeah, it's remarkable to me that those types of injuries are somehow survivable in any way. Your head is just so vascular anyway that you wouldn't
Absolutely.
just lose enough blood to not survive, let alone damaging your brain, which is, I'd argue, in charge of it all.
My mom had a patient that survived a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
Whoa.
And they had to they were warning people before they went in the room because it was so shocking, the state that he was in after the fact, but he survived it.
So about 2 weeks after he kills that family, kills the husband.
He didn't kill the wife?
So
She
it
survived?
says- yeah, because he shot the man in the face. He beat him until he became unconscious, and then he tied up Lillian and rapes her. But I don't think that he didn't injure her with the gun.
What about her eyeballs?
No, that was before.
That was the other one.
Yeah, that was the one
Oh.
before that one. Mhm.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I was like, oh my God, she doesn't have eyes.
Oh, no,
poor
she's dead.
lady.
Yeah, that one's dead.
Okay. That makes sense.
So May 29th, 1985, he has a stolen car. He did this a lot. He would boost cars. So he took the stolen car to Monrovia, California, and he broke into the house of Mabel Bell and Florence Nettie Lang. So he attacked old little Nettie with a hammer. He tied her up in the bedroom, and then he ties up and attacks Belle. And he took Belle's lipstick to draw a pentagram on her body and the walls of both of their bedrooms after he raped her. The women were found 2 days later alive, but Belle, she eventually died because of the injuries that he inflicted on her.
The one that he
2
beat with a
days?
hammer survived?
Yes. The one that he beat
Wow.
with a hammer survived.
2
He
days.
should not be a carpenter. Sorry.
The next day, he took that stolen car to Burbank and he broke into the house of Carol Kyle and he tied her and her son up. And her son was 11 years old. He had the son point out where the valuables were. And then he rapes the mom and then tied the son to her and ran away after that. So a couple months later, he drives the stolen car to Arcadia to the house of Mary Louise Cannon. He knocks her out with a lamp, stabs her with a knife from her kitchen, and then they eventually found her dead.
Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, he's like going all up the California.
And it's like sloppy as hell about it. There's no planning. This is just like
It seems very
impulsivity to the max.
Yeah, very almost kind of like Manson family, like just
Mm-hmm.
Like
completely
manic. Yeah.
Yeah, like fully out of control, just reacting. I don't even know. Like it's like I can't even having impulse control issues. Like I go shopping. I don't know. Like I can't, and even then I'm like, well, I'll just add it to my cart and then forget that I have the tab.
You don't
open
like
for,
put
a few
eyeballs
weeks.
into a jewelry box? That's not a impulse.
Well, I do, but then I make them into earrings and it's I do something with my jewelry box eyeballs.
As one should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Side note, those would be really cool earrings. Not like real eyeballs. I'm just saying, like, if you had,
Garrett's a psycho.
yeah.
But I used to have did y'all not have like the eyeball rings in like middle school?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I've seen them on Etsy and I want one so bad.
Yeah, I used to wear them too. So I agree, Garrett. Eyeball earrings would be very cool. Get like a whole matching set.
Especially if they were the kind that like are they're in a globe themselves, so they always like face up. So like when you move, they'll jiggle, but then recenter. That'd be
like
cool.
the book from Hocus Pocus.
Yes.
That's what I want.
Yes,
I
yes,
want
yes.
that on a ring with less blinking. I don't want the blinking.
Good call. Good call.
Beggars can't be choosers.
If you want the cursed eye, it has to blink.
But y'all were talking about how like sloppy too. I mean, he was shooting these people in the face. And then, so now he's just grabbing whatever's there. You think that he ran out of bullets and he couldn't afford it with the stuff that he was stealing, but he didn't want to stop murdering?
Wasn't there something pawning things? Like, wasn't he going into like pawn shops with some of the stuff that he was stealing? And I think that's how he was subsisting, wasn't it? Am I misremembering?
No, you tell me, Garrett.
I don't recall
my memory's
that. But I feel like the reason that he's now using what he can find in their homes, I think that that's a different type of escalation. He's still going for that dopamine where like now he can't even rely on something that he brings himself. He has to find a way to kill them. And then there's also like the even scarier idea that, which I feel like was also very Israel Keys, where it's like, I'll use what you have against you. And so then like especially if he's binding these women and then going through their belongings. So then you're just sitting there, and BTK did this as well, where you're just listening to whatever he's doing and you can't see him. You can just hear him like going through drawers or whatever. And then he comes back. In my family, there's a couple knives that they were made by somebody in my like way back generations.
That's cool.
So like, it's sort of like, oh, you took great grandma's knife and that's what you're going to kill me with, is this random knife that was in a drawer that has been in my family for generations. Or, oh, you're going to use, like, I'm looking at the collar that belonged to my dog that died 1 billion years ago now. Like, you're going to use that to strangle me. And it's sort of like these things that are around my home that are innocuous. They're not weapons, but you're using them against me. And I think it's possible that to him, it's like, well, it's one less thing for me to bring. It's one less thing for me to forget to take with me.
And they probably die faster when you shoot them in the face and versus stabbing someone, hitting them in the head with a lamp.
Well, I would think that
when you're enjoying the process.
Yeah. When you're shooting a gun, not that I've ever shot a gun, but it's just the one, like the kickback in your hand when you're stabbing somebody or you're slicing their throat. You really get to feel that you get to put how much pressure is involved in that. And I'm wondering if that's more where he was getting his thrills then at that point.
It's so much more intimate.
Yeah. Like even with the binding, like he could tie those knots as hard as as tight as he wanted and could see their hands turning purple if the circulation was getting cut off or whatever, and could see, and it's more face to face. Like, yeah, a gun is scary, but if somebody comes at me with a knife, I'm still not going to love it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just so
And
we're
then
clear.
they have that fear longer too.
Mm-hmm.
More than that, just instantaneous. Speaking of choking, you got right to the next one that
Oh.
he did 3 days later. Yeah, 3 days later, he headed to Sierra Madre, California, where Whitney Bennett was, 16-year-old. He attacks her while she was asleep with a tire iron. Then he tries to strangle her with a telephone cord, but the cord sparks, and then she started to breathe. So, like that electrical impulse, I guess, restarted her heart. Anyway, he ran away believing that Jesus saved her. And so she ended up surviving that attack.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Mr. Pentagram on the 83-year-olds with hammers to their head believe that Jesus intervened on this one.
I guess so. The 16-year-old
Why
wasn't
not?
supposed to die, but everybody else was. So then
Like,
2
I mean,
days
yeah,
after
I mean,
that, on July 7th, he breaks into Joyce Lucille Nelson's Monterey Park home. He burglarized her home, and then he beat her to death, but he left a shoe print on her face.
Oh, that's
And
nice.
Then on the
Jesus
same
really left an imprint on him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He didn't say for this one. So then he went on the same day, he went into Sophie Dickman's home. He handcuffed her at gunpoint, and then he tried to rape her. I just saw tries to rape her. So I don't know.
day?
The same day, and he stole her jewelry. But with this lady, he told her to swear on Satan that he stole everything of value in her home.
Well, this was also like during the height of the satanic panic,
Mhm.
Yeah.
like West Memphis 3, all that. So it makes sense also if this is getting kind of notoriety. And again, if he's seeing in the news, oh, he drew a pentagram and they really reported on the pentagram, it must be Satanists that are killing these people. Then, and he's traveling all over. You know, if he's seeing on the news, oh, it's Satanists, then like he can kind of build that up to
Or mental illness, if he's like super delusional or getting
Well,
really paranoid or
I think it could go either way. I don't know if we can give him enough credit to say that he was watching the news and trying to lean into the Satanist thing in order to mislead the police, or if he was doing it because he wanted that attention and thought that that was cool because he wasn't all there, or like you said, like it's a mental illness thing and he genuinely believed that he was doing these things for Satan. I don't know that it really goes that far though.
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
think he was definitely interested in satanic stuff. I think that was part of like why he was choosing to sleep in cemeteries some too.
Mm.
That he started trying to like, because like you were saying with the satanic panic stuff, even in the 90s, early 2000s, and maybe just be because I'm from the South, but you know, a lot of people were intrigued by satanic stuff because you're not supposed to know about it, or it's this taboo thing that still kind of lingered over for a couple decades after.
I feel like Marilyn Manson was really riding that wave still, so that makes sense. Along
Yeah.
with like being a predator, but he was definitely like kind of getting some yield out of that lingering satanic panic concern.
Oh, for
that people
sure.
had, yeah.
And I think you can still see, I mean, I know that even going when I went to Salem, Massachusetts last year,
Love that
like,
place.
That's so
well,
fun.
even going into some of those shops, I was like, oh my God, am I supposed to be here? Not that I felt like I was breaking the law or doing something wrong by looking at all these crystals and stuff, but I almost felt like I was infringing on somebody else's religious practice. So I don't know that around here we had too much. I know that I remember thinking pentagram was satanic, and
Mhm.
there was always those kids in high school that were like, yeah, Satan rules.
Right? Yeah.
I don't know that anybody really took them seriously. I think that was like, yeah, you shop at Hot Topic. Like, I don't know what like we still all go to the same mall, but I don't know that. I'm sure somebody had the anarchist cookbook. I feel like there's like Satanism where people are like, no, I'm a Satanist, and that I think that
like
you
a
know,
legitimate religious practice.
yeah, like do what
Yeah.
makes you feel good, and as long as you're not hurting other people,
Mhm.
you know, it's all consensual, then knock yourself out. Go for it, pal. So it's like to the extent that I'm like, yeah, Satanism is real. It's not what people like Richard Ramirez and their ilk make it out to be. It's not this like dogma that you have to perform for to get what you want or to satisfy whatever deity you think that you're pleasing.
I'm pretty sure eyeballs in a jewelry box is like in their 10 commandments.
Maybe. I don't know. They still haven't been allowed to put the satanic 10 commandments in any courthouses. So
Yeah.
I haven't been able to verify.
I still can't believe that he left it. Like, that just seems like such a,
But
I
I
guess
mean,
that
if
would be
you-
very ADHD to forget it, right? Too. Like in the rush.
Well, it's
of
like,
killing.
like put them. So like, I'm gonna put these here so I don't forget them, and then you completely forget it for like
Just
3
leave
years
without
Yeah.
your like token that you want to
Yeah,
keep.
like those hostess gifts that I just have in a closet, and then I
Yes.
stumble upon them in spring cleaning. Like, oh
Yes.
shit, I could have given this candle away like 4 times.
Yep.
Or to anticipate the shock value. But with ADHD, I'm not good at that. Like, I want to see the shock value, right? You know what I mean?
That's
So,
why
like,
I love
even-
saying crazy shit to Garrett a lot.
She always gets the reaction she's looking for.
Our boy took about a 2-week break.
Oh,
And
wow.
yep,
Vacation.
he went and bought him a machete, and he stole
Oh.
a different vehicle, and he
Where
decided
would
that
you
he
buy
was
a machete?
I don't
Like, is
know.
that it from like Dick's Sporting Goods or something? Like,
You could probably get one at a garden supply store, I feel like.
Yeah.
Probably
Really?
in California. Yeah. They use them like in fields and stuff.
I guess I just always think of it as a weapon, but I suppose it started as something functional. It's like
Yeah, it definitely has a
it's like a scythe, right? Like,
definitely has a function. Yeah.
That's a
It
good
is, like,
question. I was
the
wondering too.
Satan
Now I'm like, where
it's like
they
the,
definitely sell them. It probably had a cool little pentagram emblem on it too.
right. It's next to the Army Navy store, actually.
Yeah.
It's the Weapons and More store.
That's where it is.
Weapons and more.
He found out from his cousin Mike where he could get that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all the
right.
good
yeah,
weapons.
exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like overstocks.com, but for really dangerous stuff.
Yeah. So in Glendale, he went to Layla and Maxon Meeting's home. So he killed both of them with a machete and a gun. And of course, he burglarizes their home. But he wasn't done. He decided that he was going to keep driving. He goes over to Sun Valley. He breaks into the Covanet home. These people have some great last names. I keep saying that. And he ended up shooting Chainerong, which is that person's name. And then he rapes and beats some kid. And he ended up tying their 8-year-old son up. And he forced the person that he just raped to point out the valuables in the home. And he also makes her swear to Satan that she isn't hiding money either. So I wonder if he's now feeling like he is using the swear to Satan thing after he thought that Jesus saved that one girl.
So keep
That'll
Jesus
further
away
his-
if
yeah.
they're swearing to Satan.
Yeah. Like maybe that's his middle
Or-
finger to Jesus.
Maybe. And I wonder if, there was a level of psychosis where he thought of himself as Satan on earth.
Yeah. That's
So
a good
he's
thought
kind
too.
of making them swear to him, but like they don't know.
So then the following month, he ends up breaking into Chris and Virginia Peterson's home. He shoots Virginia in the face, then he shoots Chris in the neck, and he tries to get away from the scene, but Chris fights back. He ends up escaping, but the couple actually survives that.
I'm
Yeah.
like this. There's that scene in Dumb and Dumber where Harry, played by Jeff Daniels, is like trying to shoot the bad guy and like shoots all around him on a wall. And Lloyd, Jim Carrey's character, is like, Harry, you're a terrible shot. How are all
Seriously.
these people surviving? Like, you got
Being shot in the
freaking neck.
face. Like, right.
I just feel like if I got shot in the neck, like my spinal column's like right there. Like,
Mhm.
how are you not paralyzed?
And your windpipe, like,
yeah,
And your arteries.
right.
Like your carotid artery.
That's at least one of the big ones.
Yeah.
And you got them on each side.
Yes.
That's twice the chance to just take me out. And yeah, that's wild.
yikes.
That is nuts.
So that same month, he breaks into another couple's home. He actually fatally shot Elias, who was sleeping. And then he handcuffs, beats, and rapes Sakina while demanding their jewelry. He ties up their 3-year-old son.
And he doesn't do anything to these kids other than tying them up.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
I mean, like physically. I mean,
Not that I
definitely
read.
scarred. But.
Yeah, it was just the family,
Huh.
the parents that he ends up injuring. I don't know.
Interesting.
But where I got this from, they didn't mention about any attacks on the actual children. But his first victim was actually a child that they found out in 2016. But so anyhow, at this point, he ends up leaving Los Angeles for the San Francisco Bay Area. He breaks into Peter and Barbara Pan's home. He shoots Peter in the head. Then he beats and rapes Barbara.
Peter Pan?
Peter Pan?
Okay. Sorry.
Speaking of torturing children.
Wait, his name is actually Peter Pan?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I wonder if it's announced like Pawn or something, but it's P.
Maybe.
Oh, no. Not
Or
Peter
like
Pan.
Peter is like an anglicized version, and like his actual name was like something else, but he just went
What
by
was the
Peter.
wife's name? Not
Barbara.
Wendy. Okay.
Not Wendy.
Oh man.
Oh,
Barb. Daughter.
Barbara. Yeah, right.
oh my God.
Well, poor Barbara. He ended up beating and raping her, and then he fatally shot her. He used lipstick to draw a pentagram and write Jack the Knife on a bedroom wall. I don't know
Did he
if he
not
was
know the
trying to get
lyrics
his
to
name
Mac the Knife?
changed. So he ends up driving to...
That is an ADHD thing too, to miss your lyrics.
Yeah. Or yeah.
Oh my
He,
God.
yeah,
that's
like Jack the
awful.
Ripper, and you're just like confused. I mean, they thought Jack the Ripper was a Satanist too, so
Yeah. There's a couple cool connections with him to other people that he could have been. So he ends up driving to Mission Viejo in a stolen orange Toyota, and James Romero Jr.'s 13-year-old son, hears Richard outside their home, wakes up his parents. Richard flees, but the family gets a glimpse of the color and the make of his car and part of the license plate number. That night, he breaks into Bill Carnes and Inez Erickson's home. He shoots Carnes 3 times in the head. So now I guess instead of one shot, he thinks that it takes 3. Maybe he'll actually kill them. Yeah.
He's real bad at using just the one bullet, so.
He tells Erickson that he's the Night Stalker and that she must swear to love Satan. After raping her, he tells her, tell them the Night Stalker was here. Erickson later gives officials the descriptions of Richard and that they are able to find the stolen car in Los Angeles. There's a single fingerprint on the mirror that matches Richard's. We know who you are now, and soon everyone else will, is what the officials say whenever they were releasing a 1984 mugshot of his. And they also told him that there's going to be no place that you could hide. So he takes a bus to Tucson, Arizona at the end of August to visit his brother. He returns to California the next morning. His mugshot is all over the newspapers, which he notices. He attempts to carjack a woman's vehicle because, that's him. But a group of bystanders go after him. And one of them, they manage to hit him in the head and they pin him down until the cops get there. So the court was kind of interesting because jury selection began in July of 1988. And at his first appearance, he yells, "Hail Satan," and has a pentagram on his hand.
Yes. And he like held it up to show the cameras.
Yeah, there's that creepy picture of him with his hand up.
But his trial got delayed because one of the jurors was a no-show. And they later found Phyllis Singletary was her name. But they later found her shot and killed in her apartment. So the jury wondered if Richard was behind her death. But then
Yeah,
they
I
later
would be.
but they later determined that it was her boyfriend that killed her, and then he committed suicide.
God.
So in
That's
September,
wild.
the next, how random, right?
Yeah.
Timing.
Yeah,
So-
also real bad time to try to kill your girlfriend when she has fucking jury duty and the fucking cops are going to notice when she's missing like day
Yeah.
one.
Like right away.
Well, he killed himself too. So, I mean, they didn't go
That's
find
true.
him.
I guess he
Yeah.
didn't really care, but
Mm-mm. So in September 20th, 1989, he is convicted on 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. And
God.
that ended up putting him on death row. But he ended up dying, like I told you, of B-cell lymphoma June 7th, 2013 at the hospital in California. But in 2016 is when they actually linked his DNA to what they now think is his first murder to a 9-year-old, May Long, I think, a Chinese-American girl. She was murdered in the basement of the San Francisco hotel where he was living. She was raped. She was stabbed to death before he hung her body from a pipe. So it wasn't
what year did that happen?
1984, April 10th.
Oh,
Like
so
right
he was
before he went on
Mhm.
this spree.
right. And he was, so I guess when you said earlier that it was a child, I was wondering if it happened when he was still a teenager or
Oh,
something.
yeah.
But no, he was like grown.
Yep.
He's 9 years old. Oh my God.
So I wonder if something like hurt him as he was doing this, and that's why the children weren't killed later in all of the other sprees, that only the adults were
Well, all the
murdered.
other children, though, were also male, and he didn't attack any of the male adults either, other than to kill them.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
So,
Because even the
Yeah, like they weren't
16-year-old
really the
girl was
target.
female.
and
Mhm.
it based on a lot of the names that you've said and pictures that I've seen, a lot of his victims were Asian Americans, which I think lends itself to the depravity that his cousin was showing him in those Polaroids as
Yeah.
well.
That's true. Yeah.
So that makes sense that that's who he would target, generally speaking, even though, like, they say that serial killers generally don't kill outside of their own race. So it's very rare when that happens, but usually there's some level of continuity between the victims, and I think we see that with him, with a lot of his victims being Asian American. But it's interesting that he didn't kill those other children, but did horrible stuff to this 9-year-old girl,
Mhm.
like stabbing and strangling and then hanging her from a
Pipe.
pipe after raping her and torturing her basically in her last minutes.
Was in that documentary, was that where I don't know if I'm thinking of the right one. It was like a boarding house almost that he was living in, and it was like super filthy.
I don't know, Katie, you would have to remember that.
I know
'cause
that at
didn't
some
watch
point
it.
he lived at the Cecil Hotel, which I guess you could call like a boarding house.
Yeah.
But it's just like super haunted and dangerous.
Yeah.
And next to Skid Row.
Yeah.
So I don't think they call
Wondering
it
if that's where
now.
that was.
Now they call it the Stay on Main, but
That's where the girl was in the water thing, right?
yeah, Lisa Lamb. Mhm.
Yeah. And they still don't know like really what
How
happened
she
with
even
that.
got into it.
Right.
But yeah,
That was wild.
yeah, that was a wild one too.
I didn't realize that he was caught by like bystanders. I forgot about that.
In the documentary, they talked about how they tried to catch him because he was going to the dentist because I think at some
Bite.
point, yes, he had bit some of his victims.
Yeah.
And so there was like, in addition to the witnesses who survived saying like, yo, this guy's breath was gnarly. Like it was burning my eyebrows off. His breath was so bad. Like he's got to have some sort of,
all I could think is like somebody in my space like that. But with that breath.
basically, yeah. And so they like went around to different dentists and were like, do you have anybody who's got physicked gums? And this dentist was like, yeah, I do actually. And he was using like an alias. And so they were like,
I just really wish the cops went to the dentist. They were like, do you know anybody with physicked gums? And the dentist like, yeah, actually I do. Like,
now that you mentioned,
Drunk History, like where somebody's giving like
love that show. Oh my
I
god.
want that for like Katie describing true crime. And the dentist being like, actually, yeah, I do have somebody like.
now that you mention it, this guy has rank breath. Medically speaking, he gross. So they said to this dentist, like they pulled up his records or something, and the dentist was able to. They were able to like verify, I guess. And once they had his mugshot, they said to the dentist, like the dentist identified him, and so they put like
That's
a
right.
silent alarm switch in this dentist's office because they were
Yeah,
like,
because he had an appointment coming up.
yes. And they were like,
Yes.
so when he comes in, because he was supposed to have an appointment and then like he just didn't show. So then they set this silent
He's
alarm up.
probably hitting somebody with a lamp or stabbing somebody with a machete.
Right. And so they set up this silent alarm and the guy came in, the dentist like did all this stuff. His receptionist is like frantically pushing this fucking silent alarm button and it didn't work for whatever
Oh,
reason. So
no.
he like at the end of the day, the guy calls the police and he's like, why didn't you fucking show up? What the like I'm doing this. This is danger. This is a dangerous person.
Like they almost caught him like so many times.
And so then that's when they realized that there was like a wiring issue or something and the silent alarm wasn't working. And so then they
Jesus wasn't in control of that wire, just the telephone wire earlier.
Yeah.
Right. And so they fixed it, but then he didn't go back to the dentist after that. Like he didn't, I guess the dentist was thinking on his feet and he was like, okay, you need to come back one more time and then we'll like fully finish this. That dentist is like got brass ones for sure, because that is a scary thing to kind of have to improvise, but he didn't come back for the follow-up appointment. And yeah.
But if he would have known he had ADHD, then he would know that we can't prioritize well. So, nor do we go to the dentist often.
I don't know.
Some of us.
Richard Ramirez doesn't strike me as the type of person who keeps a day planner. And also there was something with his tennis shoe, like the footprint that he left on that woman's face matched a footprint that they found outside the house where the boy woke up his parents and he
Mhm.
ran off.
Yeah.
Then they found the footprint in the soil and were
Of
able
like
to
a flower.
yeah, in a flower bed because he was doing his
Mhm.
peeping Tom thing. But it was something like he was wearing shoes that were too big for him because the impression in the soil wasn't deep enough for the size shoe he was wearing. So they were trying to figure out why he would be wearing a shoe that didn't fit.
Probably because he stole it. I bet he stole it from one of the houses that
Yeah.
he burglarized, and he was
Probably.
like, "Alright, new shoes. Here's some free ones."
Mhm.
Yeah. I think there was something with him and a hat too. Somebody saw him at a pawn shop or something and he matched the description and he had a hat. I can't remember. God, my memory is so bad. It's like I watch something and I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. And then as soon as I turn it off, it's gone. It
Me
like
too. Me
disappears from
too.
my head. Like there
People
was so
ask
many
me
things.
Yeah, they'll be like, "Have you seen this movie?" I was like, "Yes, but I can't tell you anything about it. I can just tell you that I've watched it, and I can tell you how I felt about it." That's
Yeah.
it. That's all I got.
Yeah. I know kind of who was in it, maybe,
Yeah.
but that's about it.
I can
Plot?
usually
No.
remember a lot, but
She'll be like, you know that movie? And I'm like, yeah, I saw it once like 15 years ago and I remember nothing.
although I say this and then PK will ask me about some movie and I'm like, I mean, it sounds familiar, but especially I feel like if it was something I watched that was on TV back in the day when like you couldn't skip commercials,
Yeah.
that is very hit or miss for me if I can remember what happens in that movie.
Yeah. Well, I also will put a docuseries on while I'm doing something.
Yes.
Like while
Mhm.
I'm folding laundry or if I'm working from home, I'll like have it on in the background. So I don't fully pay attention all the time. So sometimes I've watched it, but I
Well,
also
Yeah,
really watched it.
thank y'all for doing this today with me.
of course.
I had a great time. Will you tell people where they can find y'all?
Yeah. So our podcast is called The Bar is Ankle High. We're on Instagram at The Bar is Ankle High. And that's definitely the best way to follow us because I'm real bad about posting to any of, of our other accounts. And we come out every Thursday. Right after this comes out, we'll be doing a series on depression. We're doing an episode about LGBT and being ADHD and how that can, inspired by a post by you,
Oh, yeah.
actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
So we'll be doing that before the end of June. And yeah, we'd love to have you. Yeah, that's where you can find us. Or just go to thebarsanklehigh.com if you want a listen link and
And
you don't
drop
want to
just a
search us.
little bit too about your Patreon because you do some fun stuff on your
Oh my
Patreon too.
God. Patreon is, it's wild. over there.
Yeah, so our Patreon is at patreon.com/thebarsanklehigh, and we do bi-weekly. So every other week we release a bonus episode called Dysfunction Junction, where we talk about basically whatever we want. Sometimes there's a reason why we're getting together to talk. Sometimes there's not. So we've done things like little games like what is a Lisa Rinna performance and what is a name of a perfume. We've done a game Hugh Jackman or Gene Hackman where I had to figure out which was which.
We just did a deep
Um,
dive on Army Hammer.
yes. Yeah, we did. We did we did a deep dive on Army Hammer, and as I mentioned, we did that deep dive on Bob Barker and Hugh Hefner, comparing and contrasting. And next week, after this comes out, will be the continuation. We just did an episode on ADHD and dating, and our bonus episode will be like a continued conversation that Garrett and I had about that topic that didn't make it into the episode. Once Garrett goes on maternity leave, we're going to be doing ad-free episodes for our Anklet and Limbo Champion subscribers, which right now just our Limbo Champions get that. But since we don't know that we'll be able to do those bonus episodes while Garrett is taking care of a whole other person and themselves, we're just going to open up the ad-free episodes. But yeah, we have a lot of fun on Patreon.
We do.
It's much more relaxed and you definitely get to know us a little bit better than from our regular episodes. Certainly you get to know Garrett a little bit better.
That's true.
Thank y'all so much for being here. And I can't wait till the next time I get to talk with y'all.
Yeah, I'm excited for our continuation of this. Our
Me
next
too.
episode we do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
of
we
course.
love it. I mean, honestly, every time I get to hang out with you, it's like so cool. I wish you lived closer.
I know, I do too. I hope y'all have a great rest of your Saturday. And thanks again for letting me push it for about 20 minutes too from our start time.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you so much.
Garrett
I
had to
know.
run into a bunch of stuff anyway.
Yep, Benny and me, Claire.
Bye.